Capitalism had nothing to do with the government printing trillions of dollars. Your socialism has failed, Dan Crenshaw. That's what we're saying.
So my question to you, is a burrito $20 these days?
Oh man, a $20 burrito?
The internet's finally blown up over what's actually destroying Donald Trump's legacy. People are finally noticing after an awesome tweet from Matt Walsh, who we don't always have a ton of respect for, but he ended up with a banger on Twitter for this one. Let's take a look. So he says, grocery prices are insane. They're still rising. Addressing this problem should be the #1 priority of every elected leader. End the stupid foreign wars and focus on the issue. It's one of the main reasons socialists are gaining power. That's obviously right. That's pretty hard to argue with, and it's objectively true. People are getting destroyed in their pocketbooks, and they're turning to communists like Mamdani to come up with solutions. Bad solutions, but still solutions. So then the internet got even crazier when somebody responded here. Oh, this is Andrew Colvett. This is the guy who took over the Charlie Kirk show. He quote tweets Matt and says, one of our TPUSA college students gave me his take on affordability. A burrito shouldn't cost $20. Yeah, a lot of this is hangover from COVID and Biden era inflation, but the lived experience is the same. It just feels like basic things cost too much. There's a few things with Andrew's tweet here. People beat him up pretty good, and he deserves it. It's just sloppy. And, he's using communist terms like lived experience. Like, don't use leftist terms. On the right, we don't need to do any of that to describe what we're actually saying. They use a bunch of nonsense filler words that we just don't have to do. And then there's the obvious part of this where he says it's from COVID and Biden era inflation. Like, Trump didn't print trillions of dollars to spend during COVID. He just yada yadas past that whole thing. But whatever, the sentiment's the same. That things are getting out of hand, and what Matt Walsh says here, end the stupid foreign wars and focus on affordability. And he's right. So then, of course, all of the worst people come out of the woodwork here. Let's start with Dan Crenshaw. And he, of course, has to have the worst take you've ever seen. He says, just hearing about this dumb $20 burrito debate, so just thought I'd make the losers on social media angry before going to bed. Stop whining, get a job, eat ramen like the rest of us did in college on a budget with 4 roommates. The market doesn't care what you think something should cost. Only communists care. They set prices, remember? Then everyone starves, remember? Are you a communist? Or are you an American adult male capable of handling his own shit? Okay, there's just so many different ways to go about this. Number one, food prices are out of control. Again, we've printed another 40% of all money ever printed since 2020 to deal with shutting down the economy over COVID and pay for all the foreign wars. We've spent over $7 trillion on foreign wars just in the 21st century, and we couldn't raise taxes on people to get that kind of money. So the government printed it because it wouldn't be popular. If you had to raise $8 trillion, $7 and change trillion worth of taxes to pay for wars, people wouldn't pay it. People would kick their elected leaders out of office and say, no, we don't want to pay. Why are we going to pay to go drop millions and billions of dollars of bombs on sand dunes in places we don't give a shit about, so that we can make the vice president's company rich and enrich all of our oil companies? Why is that the priority? That's what would happen if we raised taxes on normal people to go fight wars. So people like Dan Crenshaw have to pretend that we don't really print money, that the government just comes up with the money out of nowhere and it has no effect on prices if we print money. And even if it did have a little bit of effect on prices, everyone should just shut up and deal with it. He says stop whining and get a job, as if the vast majority of college students don't already work. while they're in college. They do, especially if you're a kid in TPUSA. You're a right-wing guy. You're not someone who thinks that you should be living off the government dole. I mean, these are people like us. These are college students that are young, Republican, libertarian leaning guys, typically, and girls too. And he says, well, the market doesn't care what you think something should cost. As if that means we can't complain about you printing trillions of dollars, Dan Crenshaw. Dan Crenshaw used to be in Congress and voted for all of these spending bills that bankrupted our country. That was what Dan Crenshaw did. And now that people are pointing it out and saying, hey, things are getting really expensive and our wages aren't going up. Why is that, Dan Crenshaw? Well, he has to pretend like it's not because he voted to print a bunch of money. Like it's not because he wanted to fund a bunch of wars that we couldn't afford. So he has to do the whole Biden routine and just pretend like it's not happening. Shut up. Stop whining. Get a job, as if people don't already have jobs. And then he's going to go out of his way to call someone else a communist, as if he isn't one of the biggest fucking socialists our Congress has ever had. He voted for more spending when he was in Congress than anybody else before him. Okay, way more than congressmen were voting for back during World War II, World War I, when they were blowing up the federal budgets. Okay, the actual people who would like call themselves socialists, like the FDR New Deal people, he's voted for more spending than they did. And he has the balls to call somebody else a communist because they're saying, hey, my currency's being debased and now I can't afford food. That's what this guy is doing here. And it's the whole thing is just so in your face. It's just amazing that he could have the chutzpah to come out on Twitter and actually say, and then he got dragged, as he absolutely should have. He goes on that, then everyone starves. Are you a communist? No, Dan, we're not fucking communists. That's why we don't think the government should be printing trillions of dollars and debasing our currency. You know the shit you voted for, Dan? That's what we're all opposing, dude. And so, yeah, as an American adult male, we are capable of handling our own shit. That's why we voted you out of Congress, dude. I wish we could have voted you out of public so we didn't ever have to hear from you again and your stupid ass takes. My God, that no one ruins this country more and then goes on Twitter and calls other people names and talks shit to some nameless 20-year-old TPUSA member than Dan Crenshaw. And then he continues. He goes on here. Let's see his next tweet. Let me pull this one up so you guys can see this one too. Okay, there you go. And after he was just getting absolutely roasted, he goes on with another tweet and says, okay, I'm sorry for triggering the comment section. Of course, the world's objectively harder than ever. And while a $20 burrito is rare, the fact that it exists anywhere is obviously proof capitalism has failed. Which is just an obvious straw man. He's, again, addressing a secondhand take here about a kid from TPUSA. Okay, this is a Republican saying things are bad, that prices are out of control. And he's making the straw man saying, yeah, that's obviously proof capitalism's failed. Like, no, dude, that's not the argument we're making. We're not saying that because you debased our currency, capitalism has failed. Capitalism had nothing to do with the government printing trillions of dollars. Your socialism has failed, Dan Crenshaw. That's what we're saying. But you have to straw man in order to even get a coherent tweet out because you can't actually take on the issue. He then says, LOL, no, just kidding. Remember when the right had principles and made fun of leftists for elevating victimhood as a virtue, want to tell people the truth, or just bribe them for their vote in the next election? Again, Dan Crenshaw, we are more right-wing than you. We do not like any kind of socialism, even military socialism, like what you are for, like when you were a shill for defense contractors. We are not for any of that. You just want socialism for your industry and your friends. We don't want it for anybody. That's why we oppose these stupid wars, Dan Crenshaw. But he doesn't get it. He wants to go on and pretend like this kid from TPUSA is some kind of leftist. The whole thing's just absolutely nuts. And then if you want an even dumber take, actually, I shouldn't say an even dumber take. Elizabeth Warren may be a dumber person, but let's listen to her take here, actually. Because then she gets asked about this, and it's funny. You can just tell this is a generational thing. Like, Dan Crenshaw's on Twitter and knows what's going on. He's probably 20 years younger than Elizabeth Warren. But Elizabeth Warren gets asked about this debate going on Twitter, and she just has no clue what's going on. You can tell by the beginning of this that she's like, burritos? What? $20? What is this, me being attacked by the Tea Party? She's like kind of defensive immediately about who's really attacking her on this, or who's really on what side of what debate.
Place like Chipotle or something. Some conservatives are saying that's, if you're paying that much, you're going to some fancy restaurant. Some people are like, no, I go to Chipotle all the time. It costs $20. So my question to you, is a burrito $20 these days?
Oh man, a $20 burrito?
This is the debate. People are asking.
There's no debate. There's a fact question here. All you got to do is look at the facts. There are a lot of things I'll debate, but I'm not going to debate over the facts. If they're charging $20, they're charging $20.
I go to
Elizabeth Warren, the question's not actually like, are you going to Chipotle and what is the exact price of a burrito? Like, the whole point is that food is way too expensive. It's way more expensive than it should be. It's not about whether the Chipotle on this specific quarter is charging $20 and this other one in Iowa is charging $18. But she doesn't really understand what's going on here.
Chipotle like every 3 days, kind of in rotation, and I have to say it's definitely knocking on $20. It's like, God forbid we want a second scoop of meat. You're definitely going over 20 there.
You may be right.
But what do we do to bring down these prices?
Well, we can bring down these prices by stopping the war in Iran so that we are not driving up the cost of all of our groceries. Everything that has to move through a truck, the gasoline prices drive up the cost of groceries. We can also roll back the illegal tariffs that are driving up the cost of avocados and we can break up our meat cartel that is driving up the cost of meat. There's a lot that the Trump administration could do to lower prices, but instead, what they're doing is raising prices. And you know what? It shows up in your burrito.
So if we stop the war, then our burritos get cheaper.
You know,
is what you're
actually, what I'm saying is the cost of food gets cheaper. All
Okay, we can kind of stop it there. That's really the end of that. I hate to say it, she's not completely wrong, but she's not right either. Like, her whole issue with prices, and she blames it on the war in Iran. And part of that is true. You know, gas is more expensive, and that does make the cost of everything go up because nearly everything needs to be transported. That's true. 100%. But it's like if you were, going to the casino every night and just blowing all your family's money at the casino. And then your wife finally sits down and has an intervention with you and is like, hey, I really think we're having some budget issues. And you said, yeah, I agree. I really think that instead of buying name brand cereal, we should buy generic brand cereal. And that would really help. Like, that's the equivalent of what Elizabeth Warren is. They're like, yeah, I guess gas being a little more expensive from the war isn't helping things. But the problem is, Elizabeth Warren, that you voted to print trillions and trillions of dollars. That is the problem. It debased our currency, and then you sent it all abroad voting for wars and transgender support in Afghanistan and queer plays in Venezuela and just all sorts of bullshit. That's why our costs are out of control and wages are stagnant, because you printed a shit ton of money that debased our currency and you sent it to all your friends all over the world pushing nonsense. That's what really happened. You went to the casino and you spent all our money and you got nothing for it. But you got to sit here and pretend like, the brand of cereal is actually the problem. Like, no, Elizabeth Warren, no, you missed the entire point again. And all these incumbents are the same way. They all vote for these spending bills. And so they can't sit there and say, yeah, the problem is that we've completely printed too much money, because they've all voted for it. They can't say that. They gotta be like, it's, Trump's war. Like, no, we can't blame the war in Ukraine because we like that war. And we can't blame the war in Israel because, we like that war too, but we don't like Donald Trump's Iran war. So we can attack that. And, we liked Joe Biden's tariffs, but when Trump does it, it's bad. And then that's the problem. Like, they just have to go back and forth in this little Overton window instead of stepping back and saying, oh yeah, there's this giant fucking problem that we keep ignoring, and it's even worse than ignoring. They're taking part in and exacerbating, which is, of course, the printing of all the money. And again, that's really what's destroying Trump's legacy, ironically, is that he spends like a socialist. If you just went out on the street and you showed people the spending charts of what Donald Trump's first administration and second administration have been spending, and you took the name and years off and just said, hey, look at these spending levels. Who do you think this was? People would tell you, oh, that's FDR during World War II. Oh, that's Obama. Oh, that's Biden. Republicans would tell you that that's got to be some kind of socialist. They might even tell you it's the USSR. That is going to be Gorbachev level spending there. But no, it's Donald Trump. And that's what's destroying his legacy. All the young people that supported Donald Trump back in 2024, they're gone. The coalition is completely moving. It started with Bernie Sanders. He got hosed back in 2016, moved to Donald Trump, and all of those people are moving back to the socialist populist left, going for people like Mondani and Chevalier and El Sayed, all the Democratic socialists. That's what's going on here. That's where all the young people are going to go, because young people can't afford $20 burritos. And yes, that is the reality. We just saw from the Mises Institute, who posts on Twitter, in 2016, a Chipotle burrito cost $6.25. And now it's somewhere between double and triple that, up near $20. That was only 10 years ago that our prices have over doubled. And they lie to us and tell us, oh, well, CPI, it's 2-3% when it's good. It's, somewhere between 8 and 9% when it's bad. Bullshit. It's more like 8% year over year. And then if it's a bad year, it gets worse than that. It can be up over 10%. Actual inflation, not CPI, which is a bullshit rigged number that's meant to make the government look good. They tell you, oh yeah, inflation has averaged 3% over the last 10 years. Really? Because I may not be a math genius, but prices are fucking doubled. So how does that work? Well, it's because they lied to you. The inflation numbers aren't correct. So that's how that happens. So Trump, again, Matt Walsh was right. Trump would be better off ending the foreign wars and focusing on the affordability. But Matt Walsh's boss, Ben Shapiro, can't admit that. Dan Crenshaw can't admit that. Because if they say, yes, the affordability problem comes from all the money the government's spending, which it just objectively does. That's where the affordability problems are coming from. Then the next obvious question would be to those war hawks, well, if government spending's a problem, why are you for sending hundreds of billions of dollars overseas for these wars, which is what they are costing? And they don't have a good answer for those questions, because the truth is they don't really care about the prices here in the United States. Dan Crenshaw's going to say it right there. He's going to say, shut up and get a job. What are you, some kind of communist? Come on, only a communist would complain about us sending hundreds of billions of dollars overseas to go fight stupid wars. Only communists would complain about that. Only communists complain about the prices of things. Duh. Stupid. It is the stupidest argument I've ever heard Dan Crenshaw make. And that is really saying something. So I wish Donald Trump would address those. I wish Donald Trump would look at Matt Walsh and follow his advice, because Matt Walsh's advice is good. End the stupid wars, focus on affordability. That's how you defeat the socialists. Otherwise, we're going to end up with President Newsom or President AOC. So that's it for this one, gentlemen. Have a good one.